This BD World, I'm SYED SHABAHAT and you're watching Fault Lines. If there is a war in our contemporary time that has killed more people, that has uprooted more people, that has caused most agony of the Second World War, it is the conflict of Syria. A conflict that has killed 500,000 people, that has thrown 90% population of this unfortunate country to less than $1 of income per day. That has affected 14.6 million people who do not have enough food to eat. The Syrian currency that was 700 pounds to $1 in the beginning of 2022 is today 4,040 pounds to $1. And that means increasing hyperinflation, which is taking the purchasing power of people away. People with pile of money are unable to provide food to their children, to provide shelter to their families, and this agony keeps going on. Most unfortunate is the fact that despite Assad's regime now holding most of the Syria, the war is far from over because many international powers are still taking their sides. Our team has prepared a package. Watch the package before I bring my first guest to the program.
Over the past decade, Syria's uprising turned civil war has been littered with grave human rights violations that rights groups say could amount to war crimes. The fighting has subsided in many parts of war-torn country, but millions of Syrians, tormented by forced displacement, torture, and the disappearance of their loved ones, will wait for any semblance of justice. 11 years ago, the arrest and torture of a group of teenage boys in the city of the Dera sparked a protest across Syria demanding democratic reform and the release of political prisoners. The mass protests soon turned into an all-out civil war, paving the way for the emergence of armed groups and foreign proxies. A new statistical analysis by UN Human Rights Office based on available data, more than 300,000 civilians were killed in Syria between March 1st, 2011, when country's civil war began, and the end of March 2021. UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Michelle Bachelet has said that conflict-related casualty figures in the report are not just a set of abstract numbers but represent individual human beings. The United Nations reported that Syria war has forcibly displaced 13.5 million people as refugees and internally displaced. That is more than two-thirds of Syria's population of around 18 million people. This large number of casualties points to the serious failure by the warring parties to respect international humanitarian law on the protection of civilians.
Ladies and gentlemen, to talk about the Syrian crisis, often people are invited from other parts of the world. In our today's program, we have invited two of our guests, which I'll bring one by one, from Syria, and one of our guests is an expert of Middle East. To join me in the studio, I have the honor of having again Mr. Ahmed Zaki, who is a famous expert of Middle East and often appears in my program. And to join me from Syria, I have Mr. Mohammed Hassan. He's a freelance journalist based in Kamsle, Syria. Mohammed Hassan, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you so much for the invitation.
Mohammed Hassan, I'm starting from you, and please try to be brief on this one. Eventually, in the beginning, it started as a protest against Assad regime, and soon the events twisted in something that has become one of the most formidable civil wars of our modern times. Can it rightly be called a civil war? Because many parties, many international powers are taking different sides in this equation.
The revolution or the war, civilian war, started in Syria before 11 years. From 11 years, you can say the structure in Syria, all the structures destroyed. The war didn't stop, never. For example, now I am in Kamishli. This area is controlled by the Kurdish forces. This area now, maybe it will be attacked by the Turks from now to just a few days. All the people in this region now, they are so scared about what will happen for them because the Turks now, they are preparing themselves to start a new offensive. So until now, no any solution in Syria, this area, the Kurdish region or the opposition region, until the Syrian regime controlling areas too. And so unfortunately, international community, they didn't do any efforts to find a solution for the Syrian crisis until now. We can say this revelation, it starts from the source of Syria, but then it's remote to all the parts in Syria. We know now in Syria a lot of forces here, like US forces, like Russian forces, like Turkish forces, and the Iranian militias, and according to them, Hezbollah from Lebanon too. So the crisis here in Syria, it's become to be worse and worse, and unfortunately, until now, no any solution. You know, the Russians now, they are so busy about what's happening in Ukraine. The Americans too, they don't care about what's happening here. And the Turks, they are the powerful player now in Syria. They are cutting more and more from the Syrian cities, and they joining those cities to the Turkish state, like Afrin city, like Ras Al Ain, like Tel Abyad, like Jarablus, Al-Bab, Idlib, all those areas, it's controlled by Turkey now. We can say Syria now, it's divided. It's divided to three parts. Yeah.
Hassan, we have to take these things one by one. I understand you have all of this information, but we have to take it stepwise. Tell me about, you mentioned many powers that are participating in this problem, in this war of Syria. But there are very serious allegations on Assad's regime as well. International media tells us that Assad has brutally used firepower against his own people. He has used air force against his own people, barrel bombs, and even containers filled with bombs. Tell us about how real are these allegations?
Look, you mean about the delegations between the Syrian regime and some states like Arab Gulf states, like Emirates, like Jordan, like Egypt? You mean this, sir?
I'm asking if Assad's regime has used brutal power against the people of Syria. That's my question.
Yeah. Look, from the beginning of this war, Syrian civilian war in Syria, the Assad regime, by his military, they used a lot of bombs against the Syrian people. But it was not just against the civilian. It's true, on the ground, they're using some bombs against the radical groups too, like Jabhat al-Nusra. It's related to Al-Qaeda. And they using some powerful against the ISIS to Daesh in some areas like Palmyra Desert, and some other areas like Deir ez-Zor. So from the beginning of this revelation, it was peaceful revelation in Syria. But then when those radical groups, we can call it Islamic groups or radical groups, when they came to Syria, like from all the world, like from Afghanistan, from Europe, from all the world, when they came to Syria, this revelation, it became to be a military revelation, because all those parts, they are using weapons. All of the parts, they are using the weapons against the civilian. The situation now, it's like this. We know what's happening in Idlib. It's controlling by Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or Jabhat al-Nusra. And Jabhat al-Nusra, it's like a terrorist group on the list of US and international community. So about al-Assad regime, he's using a lot of bombs against the civilian people in countryside of Damascus, like Douma, and in other parts like Homs, like Dar'a. But from in the last 4 years, the situation in Syria, it's more clear. We can say the map now, it's divided to three parts. The first one, it's controlled by Syrian regime. The second one, controlled by the Kurdish. The third one, it's controlled by the opposition in the areas like Idlib.
Hassan, let me bring Ahmed Zaki into conversation. Ahmed, you just heard what he has said, and this is very sad. A very sad story that media has perhaps forgotten, or the entire focus of the media has shifted to the war on Ukraine. We have forgotten about the innocent children of Syria.
Yes. Like Muhammad Hassan, as he mentioned in his introductory statement, that Syria is no longer, we can call it, is a civil war. Now it's the interest of the regional and global interests that's already on the ground. And we have seen a lot of interference from the other foreign powers.
Regional powers?
Regional powers like Iran and like Turkey. They are regional powers who are sending their troops directly to the Syrian conflict. We have seen international powers like Russia and US, they are directly involved in with opposite interests. European powers, they are backing some of the liberal forces of the liberation forces of the Syrians.
But isn't it
So
a
this
better situation than what it used to be? Because Assad's regime, with the help of Russia and Iran, have wiped out many of these groups. They hold most of the territory today, and the groups are fragmented now.
Definitely, that's when Russia intervened. The war, completely the game have changed into the favor of the Assad regime and those who are allied with him. Previously, it was very near that they were about to capture the Dimashq. Now the war is in the countryside area, like near to the border of Iran, near to the border of Turkey, where the Turkey make buffer zone by themselves, and there are some area which is close to Iraq, and that were mostly supported by the Saudi and the Sunni Muslims who are supporting the opposition leaders in terms of a Shia Sunni Muslim conflict in that kind of interest. The reality is completely different, to be honest. The issue was that the Syrian history is completely different from the other Arab states in the region. Syria had never experienced any civilian administration in whole history. Number one. Number two, they were always brutal dictators, from the Hafiz al-Assad and to his son and Bashar al-Assad. So since last 48 years, they were controlling the state with iron stick. So they built an administration which cannot tolerate any sort of opposition, whether it's the verbal opposition or whether it's the army opposition. They always go hard for the oppositions. That was the culture of the Hizbul Ba'ath, which is ruling till now, which is ruling the Syria. The other side was that they had never have a good relationship with either Western countries or America. Neither European states have good relations ever with Syria, or neither any good relations they have ever with America. So they were always very close to the former Soviet administration and the Russia. So they were always close to China and Russia.
Let's come back to the strategic angle again, but taking advantage of presence of Mohammed Hassan, who is at the moment in Syria. Hassan, Assad taking control of most of the part of Syria. This situation has changed a lot ever since Russia has started using its might and its force, and Iran's forces have started supporting Assad's regime. Now, we understand that even this is foreign interference to a great extent. But has it made the life any more peaceful in the part that is in the part of the country that is under control of Assad's regime, or is it still a fight going on in all these places?
I want to say that Mr. Ahmed Zaki analyzes it so true. Thank you so much for him, because he knows what's happening here on the ground. About the Assad regime areas, look, we can say it's so poor. The people there are suffering. No diesel, no electricity, no bread. All the materials not founded on the Syrian regime areas. And most of the people, they want to leave this country, those areas which controlled by Syrian regime. By the way, some of those people, they are coming to the Kurdish region here, like here in north and eastern Syria. I cannot say that it's ideal area, but if you will compare this region with Syrian regime areas, it's much better from safety, from security, from materials. Until now, it's true that the Syrian regime army, they controlled more areas, like some parts from south of Idlib, like Khan Sheikhoun, or some areas close to Jabal al-Zawiya. But it's true too that the people there, they are not happy. Or I have some connections with some friends in those areas. They are suffering. Nothing there is found. much of them, they are coming by smugglers. Some of them coming to these areas, another going to Lebanon or to Jordan or to Turkey. They want to make a new life for them, because it's 11 years and until now no solution for the crisis here in Syria. So if you will compare this region, this part from Syria, which controlled by Syrian regime, with Kurdish region or opposition region, those two areas, opposition and Kurds, it's much better from Syrian regime areas. And it's true too that the Russian and Iranian, they are until now founding and supporting Syrian regime, but until this support, but it's not enough for Syrian regime, because the people, they lost to trust with this regime, you know, because they killed thousands of people, thousands of them, they are still hidden in prisons, or they killed them, hanged them. Nothing is clear until now. And the Arab countries too, they don't trust with the Syrian regime. It's true that some countries like Emirates or Jordan or Algeria or Egypt, they want that Syrian regime will come back to the Arab community, but most of the countries, they don't accept this regime to come. Yesterday, it was like a meet in Lebanon. Most of the foreign ministers, like Saudian or like Qatar, they refused that the Syrian regime will come back again to the Arab community. So this is the situation I can talk it about now.
Right, Hassan. Let me go back to Ahmed Zaki. Ahmed, as Hassan has pointed out, and I have the statistics here, so 22 million people have fled their home. Some 6.9 million are internally displaced. And 84% of the people who have left Syria already are in Lebanon, Jordan and Turkey. That is putting further strain on the resources of these countries as well. And as he brightly pointed out, all those who are left inside are still in, thinking about leaving the country and going outside. And one more thing that he pointed out, I want you to respond on that as well, is that in all the places where the government has taken guards, the economic problem has now become more haunting, the economic chaos, and as we were talking about the inflation as well. How do you see all of these developments together?
It's human disaster that whatever we have seen in Syria, it have never seen I can remember for the history for the last 90 years since the end of the Second World War. Today we have never seen the human catastrophe that have taken place in Syria had ever happened to any other country in the world. Now world is focusing in Ukraine crisis. They experience it worse than that. The humanitarian, even they have been rejected from every country, including Muslim world, Western world, Arab world. The Syrian people have been rejected from every corner around the world. No help have been reached. To be honest, even the Western help which was coming through the United Nations, it's extremely not even covering 1% of the refugees.
Just like Afghanistan.
They close the doors of their countries when the people are running from the life-threatening situation, going through the mountains and through the harsh weather of the winter, and going through the harsh weather of raining and summer season. They were going barefooted with their children and family, migrating from Syria all the way to Europe just to have a safe place. All the doors have been closed in the name of the security, in the name of the checkpoint, whatever you call it, and even it arises inside the Europe and the Islamophobia issue. That is one point. Inside the Syrian crisis, there is no any administration, including the Syrian administration or foreign administration, who is trying to help the necessity of the people, even the water. As Mohammed Hassan was explaining, the lack of food is not came because people of Syria are not having the resources. The resources is there. It have been manipulated and abused because they use it for a weapon.
Hassan, coming back to you, and I have just 1 minute to close this segment, so please try to be brief. Is it right that the economic impact of inflation or the problems that are related to economics are more haunting than war in the peaceful part of Syria today?
Look, the economic situation here in Syria in total, it's so bad. We don't forget this year, no rain, so no wheat. Now the price of bread, it's basic material for all the people, it's so high. The price of diesel, it's so high. So the economic situation here, actually, it's so bad. Most of the people, they are suffering until this region too. This region, the Kurdish region, it's including all the oil and gas in Syria and all the wheat, but the prices are so high. All the people, they are the same situation here in North and Eastern Syria, or in the West, or in the Syrian regime areas. So we see now from the last 6 months, most of the people, they want to leave this country. We see the convoys of them when they go to Belarus, then they block it there. They want to go to reach to Europe. Now they have the smugglers, they have another road, new road. They taking the people from Lebanon, and then from Lebanon by sea to the Europe. So in my opinion, the economic situation here, it's the main cause that all the people, they want to leave this region.
Thank you very much, Mohammed Hassan, for being guest in our program. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll take a break here and we'll join you back with the second segment of program. Stay with us.
कुछ जुल्म की देखे से एक आग लगी सीने में मिलकर जो बने थे ताकत जब मकसद था जीने में जब पास नजरिया था अपने फिर रोक सका ना कोई यूं पाकिस्तान बना था
Book is life. Book is hope. And book is light for the future.
Ladies and gentlemen, as we pointed out in the first segment of the program, the conflict of Syria is multidimensional. It is not only a Syrian conflict. There are many international players involved in this conflict and making sure that the conflict does not wane away. To speak about all the international powers that are engaged into this conflict, I have invited another Syrian journalist. His name is Abdullah Khalaf, and he's joining me over Skype. Abdullah, I welcome you to the program.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me.
So we're going to discuss the role of different countries, and please try to be brief in your answers because the list of the countries unfortunately involved in the Syrian conflict is way too long. I'm going to start from you. Tell us, what is the stake of the Iranian regime? Because what evidently is said is that they had a religious inclination toward Assad's regime, but we have seen that Iran has used a lot of force. 12 of their serving generals have been killed in the Syrian conflict, as well as they have pulled in the Russian might, the Russian Air Force, into this conflict. So what do you believe is their strategic interest in supporting Assad's regime?
Actually, let me speak about the Iranian role Actually, this is not a new role. I believe that this role is since 1979. This is the role of Iranian and the revolution of the Iranian. And this is the main reason which the Al Khomeini had been sent from France to do this role. And you can compare between this date and the date of the war, starting war between Iran and Iraq. Actually, Iran, she are occupying some areas in Syria and sending forces in Syria, not because only the Syrian issue, which is started 2011. Actually, this is the new role, new weapon against the Arabic world, and the main player is Iran. Iran was going to play this role since 1979, but Saddam Hussein started the war against Iran. He made Iran be late more than 8 years, 10 years. Now look at Iraq. Iraq is occupied by Iran. The next step it was Syria. Within the revolution in Syria, without the revolution, that was the plain role for Iran to complete their what they call it al-hilal. They planned this and they have the green light from the superpower for Iranian. They are superpower by comparing to Iran. Iran is nothing by comparing to them, and they are Iran is under the sanction. The economy is almost collapsed or going to be collapsed in Iran. And even that, still Iran has a power and has energy to occupy Baghdad and occupy Iraq and come to Syria, to send forces to Syria. From where you are financing this, where is the superpower which push you out? What they are claiming every day that we are surrounding Iran, we are fighting Iran, Iran is a crime country, blah, 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 etc., etc. They are cheating the Gulf state and they are milking the Gulf state by the name of Iran. But under the table, this is the main role which should be started in 1979. This is what my belief actually.
Before continuing this conversation, I'd like to take Ahmed Zaki's take on it because Iran is an area that he specializes. Your quick take on it, sir.
Yeah, Iran's interest in Syria started with reactionary on the protest of the Syrian people when Saudi Arabia and the other Arab countries they directly involved with the issue going on, the civil war.
So the Arabians took interest first. And Iran reacted to it.
Iran reacted with the help of the President Bashar al-Assad, because President Bashar al-Assad make first visit to Iran, requested help.
All right.
But the reactionary request have ignited the interest of other states also, like Israel, as we are going to discuss in future. The question here arises is that Iran had influence already in the region, on the ground. And the second thing is that they don't want to lose their close ally of Bashar al-Assad in the region, because they have been isolated by Arab states and Israel. They have never enjoyed good relations with Turkey, and they have never go against, like, there was no conflict, but they never enjoyed again a good relations with Turkey. So they were feeling isolated. So if Bashar al-Assad have been left from there, the influence of the Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in the region will dramatically go down.
Let me go back to Abdullah. Abdullah, there is an allegation, mostly reported in the Western media, and it says that Iran's influence is not alone. Iran is also using other regional actors to participate in this war. And it has also pulled out Russia and has given Russia a bigger space into the Syrian region. Now, when it comes to Russia, are the interests of Russia interwoven with support of Iran, or does Russia has a different stake in Iran for which it is using the influence of Iran to assert it further?
Actually, the both of Iran and Russia, they have interest and common things in Syria. That doesn't mean that Russia and Iran are friends. They are totally not friends. Ideologically, Iran is claiming Islamic State and blah, 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 etc. And, Russia is communist country, and, this is from the left side. So there is nothing to belong to each other to make them friends, but their interest, firstly, the interest of Russia to bring back their own glory of the superpower. They are not superpower anymore. There is only one superpower. Even if you love America or not, this is the truth. The only superpower, it was the Soviet Union in the past and America. Now the only Russia, and want to prove and show power show, to make a power show. But let me tell you a very important thing. Do you believe, I'm not asking you, I'm just asking myself, if we believe that Russia now at this situation and this economical situation, they have only vodka and weapon and some other sources of economy, the gas. They are not a superpower. They are not huge and great like China, like growing up countries. So Russia has not that much confidence and power to challenge America. So we will conclude finally that who allow Russia to come to Syria to do this mass? This is a huge mass. The green light from the United States. United States want to show all the time are polished, and China and the police officer and the defender of the human rights, blah blah blah, etc. So they cannot do such role in Syria and other places. Plus the issue is the entire issue in the United States. You know, there is democratic country. They have to bring some permission from Pentagon and from Senator House of etc. So the United States will never allow Russia to come close that much in the very sensitive area in the region. So they got a green light. Russia and Iran now.
To another very important question, and it is that Iran is also pulling Hezbollah into the same equation. And by pulling Hezbollah into the same equation, it is worrying Israel further, and Israel is now striking inside Syria, and is forced to destroy the life of the people of Syria. So how does that look to you? How would you comment on the involvement of Hezbollah to support Iran, to concern Israel further, and to destroy Syria in return?
The answer is so much clear that Hezbollah is fake. Hezbollah is not fighting Israel. Why we create Hezbollah in 1980 when we already have our Palestinian resistance in the south of Lebanon? We eliminate them all and create another one. If you have a player on the ground and he achieves goals, why you put him back on the desk and bring another one to achieve a goal? So Hezbollah is not fighting Israel. Leave the drama, and this is propaganda. And this is, I think Hezbollah is not the purpose. Hezbollah is so close to Israel. Do you think that Israel will allow? Israel is supported from America and from Europe and from a lobby, huge, great lobby around the world. Why still Hezbollah, the small militia, still exists on the ground? And now they are training and getting exercises and becoming more professional to come back near to Israel, to threaten Israel. It makes no sense in the brain. So
all right,
Hezbollah,
Abdullah, we have
one last more thing, if you allow me, one last more thing.
We have a list of the countries involved in it, so I'll have to be a bit quicker. I understand your sentiments associated with it. Coming to you, Ahmed Zaki, now we are going to talk about United States, and in the country that is not only actively participating, but we have also Syrians alleging United States to start all of this facade by providing weapons to the initial groups that stood up against Bashar al-Assad's regime, Hafiz al-Assad's regime.
And this is historical mistake that America have done in bullying their army in one time from Iraq without any backup strategy. And after bullying the Iraq, there was a Islamic State group have initiated from Iraq. And that spread very quickly, and they even influence in Syria. They capture large land of Syria. That shows that the American strategic failure in the region, number one. Number two is that the reactionary came from the pressure of the Democrats. On that time, they were opposition against Trump. And Trump tried to normalize the state, and he without consult of the Senate, he removed the army from Syria. The same mistake that the Obama administration have done in Iraq. The crisis get increased. There are a lot of functional groups who were relying on the American weapons or American army support or American intelligence support on the ground fight. And when the all intervention of American army physically have removed it from the land, the groups have been divided into different interest groups. Some of them have been supported by Arab Muslim Sunni states, and some of them are supported by the Turkish, and some of them have been supported by the Kurds. So the division of the three army groups from the three sides of Syria give a very good opportunity of Bashar al-Assad administration and the support of the Russia, and they wipe out with the with airstrike of the help from the Russia. This shows that it's not only the conflict which we have seen today. The conflict was changing its color, its interest, and its actress by the time and through timeline. And you will see each time you focus, there was a active interest groups, and when that period finished, there is another interest group with the different interests.
And I just do not understand why the Western powers can interfere in other countries with an absolute mutiny. Now, United States, UK and France have provided support to what they call moderate rebel groups.
Yes.
Help me to understand what are moderate rebel groups.
They were the groups who started the democratic movement in Syria. As a, they were in the beginning, they were non-armed groups. They started building an exile government in Turkey, get support of the all Western, they get economic support. Later on, Turkey forced them that they should have to do something practically, not by paper or by outside. So when they tried to come down underground, the reality was completely different. The different functional groups were fighting. Europeans changed their mind after when they have seen that it have been involved with Al-Nasr group, who was previously part of Al-Qaeda. They are also a member of this group as their right wing. So there are a very complicated situation when you see it outside. When you go inside, there are two sentiments. As you have seen, Abdullah have explained that the sentiments over there have been misused by the leaders. Some of them have been shown that the Shia is their enemy, while the others have been shown that the Sunni is their enemy, and the reality is different.
People have been fooled in the name of God,
in the name of religion, in the name of sentiment that they have with their own people.
Let me go back to Abdullah. Abdullah, if my producer can show the map of the territory of Syria, I would want to ask you who holds what today in Syria, because we understand that there are various dynamics of this conflict, and as we were discussing, there are various parties that are holding different parts of Syria. Some are with Assad regime, some are with different other parties. So can you help us to understand who owns which part of Syria today?
Actually, I am not seeing anything on my screen, but let me answer your question. If there's a map in front of me, I will explain for you. Anyway, in the past, before 2015, before Russian coming and start air bombing and destroying the infrastructure and killing the civilian people and make that huge mass in Syria, the opposition were controlling 25 or holding on 75% of the Syrian land. After the Russian comes and it makes the card again and make nobody know anything anymore. The game changed. The opposition start to retreat and come back. Now they are holding less than 20 or 15% of Syria. In the northwest for Americans and PKK and BYD and YPG, this is the Kurdish parties, and Russian everywhere. The Iranian militias and the Zainabiyun and Fatimiyun and blah, 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 they are separated by the consultant of Russian and Al-Assad regime in the Syria. But let me conclude that there is less than 15 or less than 20% of the Syrian land controlled by the opposition. Now, if we come to the opposition, which will be more complicated to explain, because as I told you, the situation is changed since 2015, when the opposition started to be loose and the air bomb, mass air bomb from Russia, and the civilians started to be massive killed by the air bombs. The game has changed, and those parties are separated, and again a new alliance comes together. But let me prove one thing. The Al-Assad regime and the support of Al-Assad regime, they claim from the first moment that this is terrorism and we are fighting terrorism. The main point, if you see anyone who related to Al-Qaeda, it was posed by Bashar al-Assad regime. Why? Because the very dangerous prison, which located in Syria, SYED prison, it was full of jihadists, they were coming across to go to Iraq or coming back from Iraq to Europe and vice versa. He captured them and put them in SYED prison. Why he released them in 2011 and 2012? At the time that people were asking to release the political prisoners who had been captured and present because the freedom of speech. He released those jihadists, which are variety of the mentality and Islamic schools. Afghanistan is near to Pakistan, we know, and in Pakistan as well, there is a lot of school of thoughts, and this as same as in Syria, it was exist in this present. Even in this present, each room contained different school of thought of Islamic thought. He released them after 6-7 months to make this mass, to convert the face of the revolution from the civil protest. People are demanding for freedom for
Abdullah
the
Khalaf, we are short of time in this program. We are close to the finishing time. Thank you so very much for participation in our program today.
Thank you so much.
Coming to you, Ahmed Zaki. So, our closing comments on this entire saga that is unfolding today. Based on what has happened so far, how do you expect things to go on? Do you believe that the fight will stop and there will be a stalemate and no side will try to expand? Or do you believe with the help of Russia, Hezbollah and Iran, Assad's regime will try to push further?
Already the war have its sign of intent. And that shows that the domination of the Syrian government, they have almost 90% of their land. It's under control, and that the area which they control, there is only economic issue. There is no security issue at all. Currently, there are a lot of pressure on the news, and reporters have been killed in that area because they didn't allow that whatever is going on inside, it should have to go outside of the Syria. That's one side we understood, but in overall they have a full control in that area. The second area which have been controlled by the Turkish people, by the Turkish government, they created a buffer zone for them, and that's where most of the refugees are living today.
Which is inside Syria, but under the protection
of the Turkish army. And there are a small area which controls by the Kurdish of Syria. Then that Kurdish of Syria, they have enough area to protect themselves with the help of the Westerns and with the help of Americans, and they have quite economic resources outside of Syria, so they can sustain for some time. If now Assad regime try to reopen negotiations with the holding powers, with Syria, with Turkey, with the Turk, and with the other side of the Kurdish of Syria, that could come out with proper understanding.
Thank you very much, Ahmed Zaki, for being a guest in my program once again. Ladies and gentlemen, on this note, what Ahmed Zaki said, let me repeat it in my words. The leadership of Syria is now in charge of a majority of the land, a land that was entirely snatched away from them. And now the political leadership has their foot everywhere in all these parts. The remaining parts are with opposition sides, for which there is a stalemate in the war at the moment. This is high times for senior leadership to come forward for a reconciliation with all the forces. And if they can do so, Syria can be pulled out of the quagmire of crisis. We'll join you next week with another program. And until then, Allah Hafiz.